Ayin Beis, Volume 1. We're in the middle of Discourse. We're coming to the conclusion of Discourse 27. We're on page 205, chapter 107. Okay. So this discourse, this mimer began with discussing the third interpretation in sefirah. So there are three interpretations in the word sefirah. Number, mispar. 2, sipur, story, narrative. And 3, even sapir, sapphire stone, that is transparent, brilliant, clear, glowing, shining, all the words. And explaining, and it's really it's going like mamat lamayli, going from the bottom up. Sefirah is essentially the tools and instruments, we can say that, divine attributes with which God creates existence. So the structure of existence is done through these 10 instruments, these 10 faculties, 10 attributes, however you interpret them. The question is, what's their personality like? Being that they are the so-called interface, an intermediary between the divine and existence, and it's also an intermediary for us to reconnect to the divine, it's critical to know what is their personality, what are they like. As we discussed, it's God forbid to say, like who said it, the Shalosh Shuvas Rivosh, that the Tzemach Tzedek brings in Sheresh Mishatil. He says, he said to the Kabbalist, you daven to the sefirot. A love v'leila midesav, it says. You daven to Hashem, Koreinu a love v'leila midesav. Speak to God, not to His midas, because then it becomes like subtle shittuf or avodah zarah, God forbid. And that's when he says, Ani mispal l'daza atinik. I daven like a child. Daza atinik. He's talking about God. He doesn't know about all these stations. So we know that God created the world with many stations. We know that, for example, there's a mazel. But then you say, a mazel yisro. We know there's mazolas, there's all kinds of things. But the bottom line is, we don't see them as powers of their own. All they are garzim biyad hachetzev. They are like the axe in the hand of the axeman. The instrument in the hand of the craftsman. And you never forget that. So sefirahs definitely don't have their own entity. They're divine tools, divine attributes. The question is, what exactly is their personality like? So 3 meanings in sefirah tell us 3 aspects of their personality. And you can go from the bottom to the top. Number, mispar, focuses on the attributes as they are structure. Because number is the definition of distinction. When you say things are numbered, that means there's different things. Different things means there's diversity. So that's very much, as he put it, that's mispar be'elam hazeh, which the goal is to realize that the number is not just a number, within it lies quality. As dar kelimnis, not just kol dar kelimnis. Right? And that was a long discussion. Then we go to the next interpretation, that mispar is more, that sefirahs also tell a story. They tell a story of the Eir, of divine energy. In turn, the divine energy, Eir and Keli together, tell the story of their source, that God wanted to have this existence that's structured. That's a story. And then finally they tell the story that this God that wanted a structure, this artist, is really higher, is bligvul, is beyond any structure. That was the sipur part. Then comes the third, and now says, the sefirahs tell another thing. They are translucent, they're transparent. Which means that even though they're kelim, there's still structure, but their primary objective is to reveal the energy within. And less focus on the story and the structure, but on the divine within it. So to explain this mimer gave an example from the human being, which goes back to the examples in the beginning of the Hemshech. What's the classic example? We were created in the image of God. So if you want to understand atzilus, which is Adam Elyon, you have to understand Adam Atachton. It's like parallels. The Mishkan is, for example, shaped and created in the shape of a human being. Kodesh Kodashim is like the head, the Kodesh is like the body, the El Maid is like the legs. So everything is made up of 3 dimensions. So the Adam Atachton, which means the human being, is created in the divine image. What's the divine image? God has no image. Like he said, the answer is that God manifested himself in the spheres. So the spheres are not God, but they are godly. Elokus, nisht elaka, elokus. Like the Rebbe Rashab brought in the beginning of the Hemshel that the Alter Rebbe used to say, Eberster, and atzilus. Because Eberster means the Hecherer, the Eberster. What means Eberster? God is Eberster, is Echda. What's Eberster? Because that's atzilus. It's not a lekah, it's a lekus, basically. So now, with that being said, so what's the best example for understanding sefirot is looking at our own bodies, which are not man-made, they're made by God. Yeah, we look at, what do we see when we look at ourselves? We see faculties. We see a body, first of all. We see a body that has limbs and organs that are tailored to be instruments and faculties to express the attributes of the soul. Literally, exactly parallel. God's attributes are through the kelim of atzilus. Our attributes are through the kelim of our body. So he goes into a discussion, what are these kelim like? So they're clearly not the etzem and neshama, because etzem and neshama is beyond kelim, beyond faculties. So he begins by saying, first of all, there's two levels of so-called containers, or you could say kelim and levushim. Well, more specifically, two levels of levushim. And here there's inter-exchange. That's not the word I want to use. You say you use the same word in different contexts. He interchanges the word of levush. Sometimes it's more a keli, and sometimes more levush. So he explains there's two types of levushim. Levush simply means a garment. There's a levush that's like a keli, like the faculties, like the body of the human being. A body is also a levush to the neshama, but it's a levush that he calls it's attached, and it reveals the life of the soul, and it becomes united with the soul. When you see a body, even if it's not moving, you know it's alive. Then you have the actual garments we put on our body. Our jackets, our shirts, our pants, clothing. That clothing is not attached, and it's a concealer, not a revealer. What does it do? It conceals, it protects you from the weather, from cold. It protects you from other people. You conceal yourself. Not Adam Arishan in Gan Eden, before the Chet, did not need levushim because he was not involved with an outside world. He was only involved with an inner world. Okay. Then he uses that as an example. That's the same thing as in Gashmias. So we have the body is a so-called like a keli, and the levushim outside of the body are the external levushim. The same thing you have in the neshama. The neshama itself is beyond, like God himself is beyond any structure. But the neshama contains faculties. The faculties are like the body. They are direct extensions revealing and attached to the soul. But they're not the soul itself. But they're soulful. They're soul energies. Then you have levushim achshava dibra maisa. Achshava dibra maisa are like the garments you dress. You can change your thoughts. You can change your dibur. You can change how you express yourself. You can't change your colors. You can't change your body. You can't change your faculties. If your mind was created like a chesed mind, like Hillel, that's how it will always be. I mean, he qualified all this, that there are shifts, but the bottom line is, faculties don't change, the guf doesn't change. You can't change your body. You could change your clothing. A body of 6 feet tall can put on clothing of an 80-foot tall person, for example. But you can't change the size and the parameters and the personality of faculties. So you have here two levels. And then he brings this back in the last chapter that this is kelim of atzilus. Kelim of atzilus are not like levushim. Kelim of atzilus is like the faculties or like the body, depending whether you talk physical or spiritual. The faculties means the kelim of atzilus are revealers and attached to the eris. Like the faculties are revealers and attached to the nefesh, and like the guf is a revealer and attached to the soul. Which is why he says, the lashon of the Pasach Eliyahu at the end of this, what did he say? That this is nikla tikunin. So what's the lashon of Pasach Eliyahu? Goes like this, which we say tonight. Antu dafikas eser tikunim v'karin lon eser sefirah. Then he says, these tikunim are levushim ha-mechubarim, like tachshitim. They reveal, they're not concealers. And then the Pasach Eliyahu continues and says, levushim tikinus lon, which means, hey mastirim. Then comes another level of levush that conceals. So briefly, it goes like this. All the sefirot of atzilus, even Malchus, which we said earlier is the mispar, is sefirah as in it's a number. Right? And Malchus is the end of atzilus, meaning it's the beginning of creating the biyah within atzilus. It's ready, the beginning to create. It's still a sefirah. It's still a revealing force. That's why Malchus alone, without another helam, without a concealment, cannot create a yesh. Okay? And you need to have what he says here, sandal. The Malchut sandal, shubchinis now, you need to have a garment. So there you go. Why? Because even the kelim of atzilus are still attached and revealers. So you need a garment that conceals in order for the yesh to emerge. That's even Malchus.
I'm not allowed to expand indefinitely.
Right, to expand indefinitely, etc., etc. Right. Now, he said, when did we have a taste of atzilus without these halamas? So he gives a few. With the tchilas habriya before the chet. Okay? Because then Malchus was on the level of a moyer hagadol, also before the kitr galavana. So Malchus, like he says, Malchus was on the level of Vav, that Teldus Malay. Vav is Zah. And then Arizal says even more, that Malchus and Zah were on the level of Yud-Kei. Vav-Kei was Yud-Kei, so it was elevated. So in the world it was Gilei Elokus. A second time we had a taste of this by Matan Torah. By Matan Torah, where you had Gilei Elokus Lamata, like it says, V'yered L'mayla Masar Tvachim. L'mayla Masar Tvachim. Right? He had a bracha from the Rebbe, L'mayla Masar Tvachim. In Ezra atzilus. So I think the L'mayla Masar Tvachim, how we teach it means like this: that V'yed Hashem al Hasin L'mayla Masar Tvachim, that Asar Tvachim of L'mayla came down L'mata. That's how the teach is. L'mayla Masar, because what's the teach L'mayla? I was thinking. Asar Tvachim, fine, atzilus. What means L'mayla Masar Tvachim? Because it's the L'mayla of Asar Tvachim, the sefirot of atzilus, which are on the level of Mayla, that came down V'yed. That's how he teaches it. Okay, that's this. That was Hilchon. This was Matan Torah. And then after the Chet, and after of course Chet HaEgel, he doesn't say Beferish. Clearly, this was concealed. So Atzilus remains Atzilus, and we are dealing now with the levushim of sandal. And then he says the levush of chashmal. What does chashmal conceal? Zun, yeah. Not just Malchus, yeah, Zun. And so even though the kelim of Atzilus remain kedusha gemura. Like he says. I'm just reading to the end of this chapter. Then he says, finally, a very powerful thing. He says, Levushim, why they conceal us? Because they're rooted in the makif. That's right, Levushim are makif. They surround. Makif is always concealed. But then Kalim are also rooted in the makif. Didn't we learn earlier that's why Eres go down to Kalim? Because he says, but Kalim are rooted in the makif. But the way they emerge, and the process of their creation, conception, is through the Eres. Mesavas Eir Nasa Keli. So the Kalim have in them the gili that, so they're commensurate with the neshama, or the soul, with the Eres. The Vushim, on the other hand, they are rooted in the Kalim. And since Kalim are fundamentally Helam and from Makif, so the Vushim are Makif. That's what he says. The bottom line is, to put it, to visualize it, think of it like this. I'm just using a small example. You imagine, I'm just using a very physical example. We talk about a projector of white light is shining. It's extremely powerful light. But it's so powerful, there's no details will be emerged because it's just white light. So you have to put a film. So you put the first layer of film is a filter that is transparent. But it's a filter. It's already a filter. Let's say this filter has letters on it. So you're going to get some shape of chesed, gvura, but it's still, the dominant force is still the light. Then you need another filter. This filter is already a garment that's detached. And now the light is coming through far more translucent or even opaque. Just little things. Then the letters suddenly become very dominant. And the light is there minimally, but you may not know. So in this world, like he said, we look, for example, we see the film in the lowest level. All the filters. So all you see is a tree, a bird, a sky. Sumar menechem. You have to think and meditate and say, you know what, behind this, there must be behind the curtain, there must be behind the filter, there's more light. If you look at atzilus, you still get a structure, but atzilus is very, very transparent. So the letters are there, but it's all clearly divine. You right away, it testifies. You see something, you see a tree. I see the godliness in it. Today you have to look for, like you said, to the point that you can even, today, in our world, you can convince yourself that the ashpa of the mazolis, you can say it's coming from their own power. Or yadi. And not realize that it's gazan biyad achetziv, that it's like a axe in the hand, the instrument. And atzilus is clearly the instruments. But the interesting thing is atzilus is still a world. We're not talking about atzilus is not the projector, and not even the white light. It's already a filter. But it's a filter that's very, very clear, transparent. It's very clear that this world is aligned with its creator. When you go down the levels, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiyah, with all the Tzimtzum and Pasoyas, Levushim are added. the nalim, like you said, levushe haregel, levushe haguf, levushe hareish. You could even say bria is levushe hareish, the garments on the head, and yitzir is levushe haguf and levushe haregel, like the shoes. So what do we see now? We see there's light because there's existence, but it doesn't. But it doesn't testify automatically that this is divine. You could say, hey, maybe it's not, or maybe, or whatever. Or you can ignore it. I think that's a very good visualization of how it works. And if you go all the way up, obviously higher than atzilus, you won't even have letters, but you'll still have something that's more than the light. He's not discussing that right here. But that's the key, is how do you visualize, literally from a grubbe, defined a world which is completely containers here. The containers dominate. And slowly find the light in it. He said, open your eyes. What it means, you look at an event that ostensibly, if you don't think about it, would say it looks random. You look a little deeper. No, there's a light going on. There's a story. And then, so the numbers tell a story, and the story reveals light, and we climb this ladder. That's what he's saying here.
Not the filter is only atzilus.
Huh?
Not the filter is only atzilus.
Yeah, well, not the filter is not even the projector, because he's not even a projector of light. Yeah, atzilus is beyond the source of light. You can't even call him a moyer. So I wouldn't go to atzilus yet. I would, there's a lot of layers till you get to atzilus. No, there's definitely a source for it all. But when you say atzilus, you don't even. In this case, the projector would be called the moyer. But atzilus is not mugdar as a moyer. So now, obviously, all this, just to fill the picture in, is in microcosm. Then there's the macrocosmic atzilus b'ri yitzir asiya, and all this is on a much more subtle level, higher. Right? Like in the machshava of the divine, the projector. It's not even a projector yet. He's envisioning shiras mebikeach, what the letters will look like. There's no letters yet. That's the shima in the shadish, in the 10 hidden spheres. See what I'm saying? Atzilus is already letters. It's not letters that we can relate to because they're still so subtle. So when you're in atzilus state of mind, means you are aligned, like we said. When you're completely you're involved in something and there's no sense of self, you're there, but you're complete shluchah shalom kamesa. You're a complete transparent channel for whatever the Mashiach wants you to do. And this is all still mamala kalam. Because Sefer Kalam, as we spoke, Sefer Kalam is the chief of staff. He's not interested in these details. He's just the Rotson. He's like the light, just the white light. The goal there is not the details, but we need a world with details, a world of structure. Okay, I think that's a fine summary. Kuv Zayin, chapter 107. So the last lines, what were the last lines? That's where there are people who worship the sun and the moon because they don't know, even though it's only Kigaz. The Kalim, even in Asiya, are complete a Kedusha. It's only the Levushim that create the Halamas. That's what he says. Levushim have Tevara, Yisir, Asiya, and so on. So even here, the Kalim are also Kedusha. That's very important. So when we take a Dover Gashmi, a physical thing, a piece of bread, or a table, and it's on its own, it's chayil, it's mundane, and you mekadesh it, you sanctify it by making a bracha on food or using it for L'Shem Shamayim. What you're doing is you're piercing the levushim that conceal its divine nature, revealing the divine will in the thing. In other words, how it's really a keli of Kedusha for Elokus, basically. And then there's the levels, Tashmisha Mitzvah, Tashmisha Kedusha, etc., etc. Hechsher Mitzvah. But it's all, basically, you're aligning a world that is all covered up, and you're turning it into Kalim and Asiya, Kalim for the divine. Then obviously there's climbing the ladder all the way to atzilus, etc. If you don't do that, and you're not Mekadesh, there was a Kadesh Achel, Altaras HaKedesh, so then it remains in domain that's all concealed, and all the levushim and garments, the detached garments, are concealing its true nature. And Rahman al-Islam, like he says in Tanya, if you use it for the hepech, you make it even darker. You put more levushim on it, to the point that it becomes a davar asr. In Tanya, where he says klippas nega, can go either way. So klippas nega, that's what a klippa is. What's a klippa? A klippa is a shell. And we discussed, there's harder shells, like a nut shell, there's softer shells, more, what do they call them? Rach. How do you say in English rach? Softer, less resistant. Some of them you can even eat. The goal here is to recognize there's a fruit within, and then align that object to what it was really created for. Okay? So our job is to make these kelim, machen kelim. The reason I'm saying it because sometimes it says that our job is to take Gashmis and make it a keli for Kedusha. Here he's saying the kelim of an asiyah are also Kedusha. It's just the levushim don't let us access it. So it's really getting rid of the bad levushim, or the neutral levushim, to see the kelim, what they're really made of. Yeah. Okay.
You need the levushim also. It's not only
we wouldn't exist if there were no levushim. The light would be too intense. That's first of all. Second, the detached. God wants it to be concealed, so we should overcome it and be smarter. Yeah. Two things. You can't have an existence like ours without levushim. Just like you can't walk in the street if it's cold outside. You have to have garments on. You're going to get killed. If not, the person will freeze. We need the protection. In a perfect world, you don't need it. In a Gan Eden, you didn't need it. You didn't need levushim. I mean, levushim means everything. Levushim means all the defense mechanisms that we have. Everything we use to protect ourselves from hostile forces. V'zehu, chapter Kuf Zayin, v'zehu, mashakasa gabi Yankiv v'lovan, la'achash Yankiv bitter tsein lovan. Remember this is Parshas Vayetze here. So this is the Parsha of Laban and Yaakov. So this is what it says by Yaakov and Laban. After Yaakov bitter, he refined the tsein lovan, because we know he was a shepherd, right, for 14 years, 7 years, another 7 years, and even more years than that. Huh?
7, 6.
Right, 20 years, for the sheep of Laban. So before we continue, so everyone knows, obviously the Torah tells us a story, it's not a narrative, historical story, it's because he was doing an Aveda. There was an Aveda, Birat Hatzain is a big Indian chesed, as he's going to explain. Now, you'll see here, now he's going to go into the sugi, we talk, Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim, is this parsha. That when it says there, that what did he do to breed the sheep? So there's this mysterious rituals that he did there with maklis, with the sticks, to get them to breed. So it ends up being 3 types of sheep. Akudim, which was like one big spot. There's different interpretations. This is a sikha from the Rabbi. Nekudim is many spots, and Vrudim is like they stripes.
Spotted and stripes.
Spotted and stripes. Rashi, there's different, yeah. So Akudim Vrudim becomes a whole yesod in Arizal, in Eitz Chaim, for Seder Shtalshus. So basically, Yaakov was building Seder Shtalshus there. He wasn't just dealing with sheep. He was revealing godliness on many levels. That's the bottom line. That's what it says, Birat Sein. For Osamahem, and what did he make from these sheep? Akudim, Nekudim, Uvrudim. He makes from them Akudim, Nekudim, Uvrudim. Just to make this a little more palatable, because someone will say, hey, what's going on? I mean, I read this, he's a shepherd. You want to say there's some hints to deeper things? Great. But you turn the whole thing into a spiritual story? The answer is absolutely. So the Shalah, and the Ramem Mepane, and some others write that people mistake and they think the Torah is medaberes bel yenim and meramezes betachtenim and meramezes bel yenim, which means it speaks about things down here and it hints to things up there, so there's spiritual messages. In truth, they say the opposite. It's medaberes bel yenim, meramezes betachtenim. It speaks really about, it's a spiritual story. And then it hints to things down here. So of course, I've shared this many times, and people say, what are you talking about? What do you mean the Torah is literal? It didn't happen? And God forbid, the Torah happened, and yes, the literal happened. The question is, did it begin with the literal, and then you look for some deeper things? Did it begin with the spiritual, and then it came down to the literal? The answer, of course, is the latter, which is that you don't need to chesed for this. And you say words like, the Eibishter looked into the Torah as a blueprint. The Medrash says, Pisrois or Pinkasois. The Torah is like the blueprint that the architect looks at. Or B'loshna Hazer, Istakel Baraisa Bara Alma. That means before there was a world, he looked into the Torah. The Torah speaks about Yaakov and Esav, about Parei and Mitzrayim. So what did he see? What? So you have to say that he didn't see physical Pareis. He saw, it was the Torah, is Chachmoshe, the Tzenish HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's God's, it's a CAT scan of God's mind, what he wants. Then evolves into a Laban, into a Yaakov, into a Esav, and so on. And this is clear many, many ways, because when you look at, for example, you say, Alpaim Shana Kodma Teda Le'elam. Same thing, what kind of Teda was there before the Elam? The whole Teda is Bereshis Bara Lakim, it starts after Elam. How could you say, Alpaim Kodma Le'elam, it says Bereshis Bara Lakim, which is the creation of Elam? So clearly there has to be levels of Teda that are higher. I mean, there are many proofs, I'm not going to go through all of them. But then you have, of course, the Maimer Chazal. Dibra Teda B'losh B'nei Adam. What does that mean? The Torah speaks in the language of man. God has eyes and ears. God gets angry. The answer is the Torah manifested itself in Zeh Torah Adam, in that sefirot of Adam, in the language of human. So anyone that, if you have a little understanding, so what does the Torah look like to God? It's a whole different world. So every character, every episode, every detail in the Torah is really a spiritual story that precedes, which also explains how you could say that the of is Kaima Kol Torah Kaim Shenitna, which is a contradiction of terms. How could you be Mekayim before it was given? Because what was given Matan Torah was not a new thing. It was a Torah that was always there. They knew elements of it, either Baruch HaKadosh, or through instinct, or through their parents, or whatever, however it worked out. So they didn't have the Torah officially. That's why Avraham could not be Mekadosh to change the Chefza, physically change the world, except a bris. But they had the ideas of the Torah.
And he didn't put on tefillin.
Or Maklis. The Zohar says Maklis was like film. Yeah. The physical film for sure not. Right. The concept, Shibud Alev HaMeich, I'm sure Avraham had, pretty nice. Probably better than us. But he didn't have, he had what you can do to Sheresh and Avraham. He did it, it's like what we say, Chesed, not Rebbe Chesed. He was able to achieve it through his own effort, which was pretty great. But to have that mitzvah v'esa, where God says this is what you should do, and gives you the power to change the physical world, the Rebbe brings why he says, Simna yad detached sidechi, Simna yad detached sidechi. It's not a tznius thing, because there was no other chefza shekdusha to make a shvuah.
I saw that Even Ezra
a neder.
Even Ezra doesn't say that doesn't mean that.
There's different interpretations. Fine.
Rashi,
yeah. But look. Anyway, the point I'm making here is that I just wanted to, before we continue, just to give a little clarity when you say I couldn't. So really, it's a story above, and we are told the story in our terms, so it sounds like sheep and so on. So it's real sheep. But he was aligned when he touched a sheep. For him, a sheep was a level of a divine level that he was working with to be mamshech eres, to be mamshech, to transmit spiritual stuff.
Sheep represents cloud itself.
Yeah. There's a few beautiful sikhs from the Rebbe on this about why says the most docile and most edel of all animals. For example, that's why it says a mashal for Rei Yisrael. That you say a shepherd of Israel. Why shepherd? Because sheep are representative of a very edel level. Even a kudim brudim, there's a sikha from the Rebbe, the Rashi. Then he goes into the chesed and Kabbalah. Okay, so he's going now. Three different types. What is the kudim brudim? Saying klolos, elam is biyah haklolim. So remember, we spoke about biyah haklolim and biyah protim. So the whole seder shlosh of the cosmic order is divided into microcosm, macrocosm. Whatever exists, like we say, elam katan zeh adam. So the Medrash says that just like in the world, a human being is a small universe. Just like in the world there are mountains and valleys, and there's Dem Tzemei Chaim Edah, but we also have mountains and valleys. Others the Rabnos and other Medrashim, they spell out actually every part of the body, how it's a microcosm of the topography of the world. So the same thing is a nishtalshlus. When you have atzilus, b'riya, tzira, siya, that's a microcosm, but then there's atzilus, the klolos, and b'riya, the klolos. In the Drush Gimel Mini Adam from the Alter Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, he breaks it down specifically. Generally speaking, atzilus, the klolos, is Eid Ein Sof, Malchus of Eid Ein Sof, Lifnei Tzimtzum, the 10 hidden spheres. B'riya, the klolos, is Ak, Adam Kadmon. Yitzira, the klolos, usually is Akudim and Nekudim. Sometimes Atik and Arich. And Asir, the klolos, is atzilus, the protis, and Biyad, the protis. When you break it down, atzilus, the protis, is Asir, the klolos, essentially. So this is just a matter of repeat, and it's not a repeat.
What's with Vrudim? What's the reason?
Vrudim is atzilus is the pratis. Akudim vrudim is bichlal. Well, it depends whether you go with pratim or klalim. If you talk pratim goes like this. Ak is bria de klalos. Oh no, klalim. That's klalim. Sorry, pratim is akudim is the world after ak, before toyu. It goes ak, akudim, nekudim, tikkun, atzilus. Atzilus, tikkun, and vrudim is the same level. Let's put it this way. Toyu is nekudim, just nekudis. Akudim is a world of 10 eris in one keli, and ak has no keli at all. That's the way it works. Everything nachon simsum. And klolim. So biyah klolim. Here he's teaching akudim a little more. Akudim is biyah bria de klolos.
Tayu is
Nukudim is tayu. It would be itzira de klolos, and vrudim would be asir de klolos. Is atzilus de pratis. Let's see how he teaches. But that's a general picture how it works.
Ak is not the kudim, right? Ak is ak, and then
Ak is never nekudim. Ak and akudim are very close. Sometimes they are. Sometimes
there's ak nekudim, and then there's tayu.
ak akudim.
There's ak and there's akudim.
Nekudim.
Then nekudim.
Nekudim is tayu.
Is tayu. Nekudim is tayu.
And vrudim is tikkun and atzilus.
So where's Nekudim?
Right before atzilus. It goes like this. It's on 10 energies in one container. Less energy, so it becomes 10 containers, but they're very powerful energies and very strong, and kelim and very weak containers.
So where is it between Ak and Atzilus? Which
Yeah.
level is this?
Yeah.
I guess so.
No. Chesed is chesed of atzilus. That's another level. I'm not talking about chesed now.
So
Tayu is before
where do you
chesed.
put it?
I told you, ak, akudim, nekudim, and then just tayu. Then comes tikkun atzilus. Chesed of atzilus is lower than tayu.
Ak is Akudim.
Ak and akudim are two worlds, generally speaking. I said ak, akudim, nekudim, vrudim. Ak, akudim, nekudim, tayu, same thing. Then tikkun atzilus, vrudim.
So where is the Akudim?
It's after ak, between ak and nekudim. Akudim, it's called akudim. That's what it's called. Not always they have a name. Here he's speaking generally, but akudim, vrudim, shein klolos elim is biyah klolim. So what does it say? After Yaakov was mevarad the chain Laban and made from them these 3 levels, in other words, he's avedas on these 3 levels. Ksiva yikach Yaakov Evan veyarimo matzeva. He's going to the pasuk, Evan Azes, right? So after this, actually no, this is a different pasuk. This is the pasuk at the end. This is what we confused. Remember? This is Shin after Laban. This was before Laban.
Yeah.
And now he's going to the end. He also made a matzeva. Vayikach Yaakov Evan. This was Evan after Hashem promised him that he would be protected. So he made a simon. So he made Evan Azeh. So Sam Matzevi Beis Alikim.
That's right before Sheni.
That's before Sheni. This he's talking now is after. He says La'achrei she Yaakov B'Ras Atzein. Vayikach Yaakov Evan another stone. He took a stone. Vayirima Matzeva. And Vayirima he erected, constructed and erected a Matzeva, a marker. Vayemer Yaakov le'echav, and Yaakov said to his brothers, which means to his, I think, shepherds. Am I correct?
It means
Yaakov says echav his children or his his family. Loch to avonim, gathered the stones. V'yilka to avonim, and they gathered the stones. V'yasu gal, and they made a mound, a heap. V'omer Laban achakach ad hagal hazeh. This gal will be a testimony, a witness. Ve'eda hamatzeva imani lo yaver v'im ata. This will be a testimony, a covenant, basically between us. That imani lo yaver, that I will not, like a boundary, I will not cross over. V'im ata. Very interesting that's happening. What's going on in Israel now, right? There's a deal with Laban. Laban kriegt wurde darf nicht. Okay. All right, but
We're not bound by these rules.
That is as to Akka Yankov.
Yeah. But they're bound by other rules. Iman ilaver v'imata. What is the lashon there? Iman ilaver. I will not. That if I don't, I will not cross it. V'imata, and you will not cross from your side. Basically.
That's the law. Rashi said he could cross, but only to do bad.
Yeah.
The pragmatia.
Right. Now, why did he make this agreement with him? Because this was after Laban pursues Yaakov when he leaves with his wife and children, right? And that's where they make an agreement that they'd be at peace with each other. Yeah.
It says Vayikra here. It said.
Vayilkatu. Really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
And it says.
But it does say liktu? But it would say laktu avanim? What does it say? Liktu. Okay. Okay, it's interesting. So. Oh, here it says Eid Hagal Hazeh. Okay.
It says Hagal Hazeh Eid.
Go ahead, continue. Go on. What does he say? Manilei Avid. What does he say there?
Yeah. Vayemer Laban liYaakov, Hine Hagal Hazeh, V'hine Amatzeva Shel Yerisi, Beini V'einecha. Eid Hagal Hazeh.
Oh, there it does say Eid Hagal Hazeh. Okay.
Yeah. V'Eid HaMatzeva.
Okay, that's the pasuk now.
Mani lo Yaev Elecha Hagal Hazeh.
Yeah.
V'Imata lo Yisav Elias Hagal Hazeh. V'Samatzeva Hazeh Shel.
Okay, little. Yeah. Fine. One second. We're still not explaining it. He's going to explain it now. Because of Abachai, the Bachai explains, writes, She Yaakov Osa Matzeva Loi Gal. Who made the Gal? The family, the children made the Gal. Yaakov made a Matzeva. What's doing to Matzeva and a Gal? A Matzeva, I guess, is a marker. Make like one stone. And a Gal is a whole heap of stones. Yeah. V'omer le'echav liktu avonim. Hainu echav shalavan. There it says Echav. Rashi says Echav Shalavan. That's why I wondered. I'm wondering. Machai Taishlet.
I think also Rashi says that.
That's why I remember Echav was not his family. I remember Echav was the shepherds or something.
Laban.
The yeah. What does Rashi say? Okay, Bachai has a different type. Bonov. They are Bonov. Okay, it does say children. Yeah. Okay, v'amar le'echav liktu avonim hainu echav shalavan. Okay, that's the Bachai is touching. That means he was speaking to the brothers of Laban, means the associates of Laban, B'pashtus. And his kavana was, Yaakov said, that they should also make a matzeva. V'heim osu gal. Instead, they made a mound, a little mountain, a little hill.
What's in practice?
The difference?
What's the significance between
he's going to explain this, obviously. This is the whole...
Physically, one is one stone, one is
in Pashtus Aksuvim, one second, no, in Pshat, it doesn't necessarily mean they did something different. Here, the Bachai is clearly saying they changed, that he wanted them to make a matzeva, and they made a gal. In other words, a gal seemingly is something negative, and a matzeva is not. In the Pasuk, you don't really distinguish matzeva. Matzeva really means one stone, and a gal is like a whole thing. Why they did it that way, I don't know. What does Rashi say anything about? Why Pashtus, what was the...
This is all according to Bachai now.
No, I understand, but I'm saying according to Pshut Shel Dvarim, what was the significance? Gal, Matzeva, is there a difference in Gal and Matzeva? Yeah, but he's going to explain it for sure, that's the whole thing, but I'm saying, you ask him Pshat. V'sham in Bechai, the kavana shalem hoya al galgal hachama shezeh hoya avedasam. The reason they did it, because for them it was like a sign for the galgal hachama, for the sphere of the, it was like a symbol of the sun, right? That was their Avodah Zarah. That was what they worshipped. That's why he didn't want them to make it, probably. In other words, a matzeva is a sign, but you make a gal, like you're building a whole monument. Basically, it's a monument to the sun. That's what it is. Interesting, Bechai. Okay, it's probably from a medrash. So now we're talking. Let's talk a little chesed. Always easier chesed than the pshut Shel. Easier. It's a deeper story. What's the Indian in this? So bottom line, what he just said is that there's some deeper story. So if you were going to give a drasha, you could begin like this and say, what's this whole thing? Verses after verses of Yaakov with sheep, and then they make some deal, and a matzeva, and a gal. What's going on here? What's the inside story? So the Indian Hud, in Yiddush, she has Beis Pirushim be Indian Hagal. She'asalov and Beinoi lebein Yaakov. It's known that there are two interpretations in the gal, the mound or the heap, that Laban made between him and Yaakov and Jacob. two. What are the two inyanim? Ha'echad, the Laban b'chinas Laban ha'elyon. Laban is Laban ha'elyon. Remember we spoke Dibra Teira, so the Teira is rooted beruchnis in high levels. Laban means white. It's rooted in what's called the supernal whiteness. It's one of the highest levels in ruchnis because it's pure white light. It's a very high level. We'll soon see what level it is in context. So it says in Eitz Chaim, by the way. So what does it say? That it says v'asa. The pasuk goes v'asa milsein Lavan akudim nekudim v'rudim. So it says in Eitz Chaim that Lavan Elyon is Ak, and from Ak he made akudim nekudim v'rudim. That's what it says in Eitz Chaim. The Lavan Elyon shalamayla me'elam atzilus. That's higher than the world of atzilus. V'yankiv u'b'chinas elam atzilus. And Yankiv is the world of atzilus. So now, according to this, what's the detached gal? V'gal she'asa Lavan Elyon, and the gal, the mound, the little hill, the little heap, that the Lavan Elyon, that the level that's higher than atzilus makes, u'b'chinas ha'parsha she'b'nei ein sof ha'maitzlel and atzolim. That's the parsa, the curtain, or the veil between the emanator and the emanations. So Lavan Elyon makes a parsa between it and atzilus.
Is that negative?
It not necessarily. We'll see. It could be a positive because that's how the shtalshlus evolves through the tzimtzumim. But that's what he says. It has the vart. So Lavan is Lavan Elyon, and which makes a gal a parsa, a barrier and filter between the emanator and atzilus, which is Yaakov. This is known that just like there's a parsa, there's a veil or a curtain between atzilus and biyah, between atzilus and biyah. Same thing. There's a parsa between chesed of atzilus and chochma of atzilus. Because in Chesed, Lavan Elyon, you're talking about a level that is beyond limits, beyond parameters. So in order for there to go, transmission of energies in atzilus and shear with a measure, midah, and a size, and a shear, a measure and midah and a parameter, you need to have another parsa. So there's a parsa under atzilus that goes into biyah, there's a parsa before atzilus that leading into atzilus. This is all still the first inter.
He's not talking about Kesed Atzilus, he's talking about Haya.
No.
Right now you could say Kesed Atzilus. We'll see where he's going. This is still the first interpretation in Gal. Now, the Pasha, as we know, is made of Asis. Now you're going to get where it's Avonim. It's made of Asis. We learned earlier, do you remember we learned earlier, Asis are what? Levushim. Are primarily words. And letters, by definition, are concealers. We also learned Akshehem Bilti Musudarim. However, there are words that are letters that are disorganized. We learned that also. Remember that reveal nothing. When you speak something that are not organized, it doesn't reveal, it confuses. The Asis Musudarim Arihem Kalim. Organized letters, when you speak in an organized way or communicate in an organized way, they're that's the Kalim. Shebehem Val Yodam Nimshachun Izgala, that in them and through them is revealed the energy, the light, meaning the message. When you speak Esis Adibur, not a shikr. A coherent person, sober person speaks, so his words are revealing what's the ideas that they want to convey. That's Mesudar. Aval Esis Abilti Mesudarim, that's already a parsa. Words, letters that are disorganized, they conceal the energy or the light. Like riddles. The kameyes. Or the letters you have in a kameya. Kameya is amulets. So you look at the letters, you don't understand them. They're all jumbled. Chida is a riddle. That doesn't mean there's no energy in them. It means that it's concealing it deeply. They are in order to conceal and hide the secret within them. That's not so often you find it in this Esis HaKameyas.
Chidus doesn't really mean a regular riddle. It means when you take a word and you
like anagrams, yeah.
Like you have to try to figure what the
yeah. But like unscramble, like scrambled letters, yeah, like scrambled eggs. So scrambled letters. There's a chida, there's a moshel, and there's a melitza. So when you say a riddle as in a question, someone asks a question. Chida can be used in several ways, right? But the chachamim would give a chida to their talmidim, sharpen their minds. But that's it. But a chida, but in this case, it's a chida is like it's the letters are not in regular order, but they're concealing like Eshes Perchis in Akriva Kedusha. They're concealing a deeper secret. So we have here two types of letters, basically. Parsa, this is an example, the same thing, the Parsa Sheben HaMaitzel and Atzolim, the Parsa, the veil, or the shield, or Parsa, the curtain, Parsa, the Porechus. So between the emanator and the emanations, that he said between chesed and chokhmah, Sheigam Kim Esis HaBiltim Mesudarim. It's also made up of letters that are disorganized. Omnom. Which is why it creates a lower level. In other words, within the passages definitely lies a powerful thing, but it's allowing an idea to be conveyed to a far lower level through the disorganized letters. Okay.
He has to qualify because there's no isis before atzilus.
Let's see. Omnom, however you do it, it's known the isis with kelim the kesem begins isis achkike. When we say isis and kelim of keser. So he said the kelim are like dibur, that's Esis Musudaris. The parsa is Esis Bilti Musudaris, disorganized. He says, but however, it's known that the Esis and kelim of atzilus, of Keser rather, I'm sorry, heim b'chinas Esis achkike. They're like engraved letters. So einu b'chinas mitzias davar. They're not a physical. They're not an entity. When you write letters, ksav, Esis aksav, you take a pen or a quill with ink, and you're taking and actually placing letters on the parchment or on the paper. Yes, maybe I'm very hard to erase afterwards, but there's still two entities and they could be separate. When you engrave letters in stone, the letters you didn't place letters. You took the stone, you carved out letters from the stone itself. So he's just saying it as an example where it's still it's still aces, but it's a far higher level. There's no real kelim there. That's what he's saying. Kelim and atzilus would be like aces aksav. Kelim, it's so many levels in Kelim here, it's amazing, yeah. The Kelim of Keser, by the way, this goes back, remember a few chapters back where he said, Kelim the Keser. So I think it's all connecting. The Kelim of Keser.
But also the Kelim of Atzilus compared to the Kelim of Biyah is the same idea.
Yeah.
He's saying that this parcel is not Malin Gamu, but the parcel which is after atzilus is Malin.
Let's see, yeah. So he goes like this. Okay, so this is Esis Achkike. That's why even the letters that are disorganized there are not completely concealers. Why? Because they're not, because in a place where they're, let's say, ksav, and then they're disorganized, you have two so-called helamas. One that is separate from the paper itself, from the parchment, and two that is disorganized. Here is disorganized letters. Let's say in Anoichi is written instead of Aleph Nun Chaf Yod, it would be Nun Chaf Aleph Yod, whatever. But it doesn't have the second concealment. It's made of the same stone. So therefore, even if it's disorganized, you're still in a higher place. It would be like almost like a chida that you would give from a subject matter itself, or a chida from a strange, like we say a moshel medavar zar. That would be the reason what he's saying here. That's why. So it's disorganized, but it's still, the hints are much closer to you, because you say, it's like telling somebody, look, I'm giving you the hint, but the hint is within the subject we're discussing, or the hint is from something so foreign, so you're both in a foreign world and is disorganized, which is far more concealing. Yeah. So I wanted to just give an example. That means even though the gam al yidei parsa, also through this parsa, meaning from kesed to lower, from higher than atzilus into atzilus, the even hamshach zeh, the way that the oil is transmitted is not a mahus achar. It's the same, made of the same thing. It's concealed in this context that it's disorganized, but it's of the same substance. The parentheses now, which goes. Okay, not just a few lines. Not like the pasha between atzilus and biyah, the lower pasha. There, sha'er al sha'adeh pasha, er shal tulda. There, the Eir in the through the comes to the passage is Eir Shel Tulda. What means Eir Shel Tulda? It's an expression in Kabbalah and Chassidus. It's not like you say Tulda is Ovis and Tuldas. It's an Eir of the product, so to speak. It's like it's like a bounce away. It's two steps away from the source. She'enikam hu se'er atzilus. So in other words, atzilus has the Eir. In Malchut of atzilus, it already now creates a reflection, and the parsa is no longer giving you the Eir in the same mahus. It's already giving you now a type of reflection of a reflection, basically. Yeah. So it's not like it's not like the same personality of atzilus. I'll give an example in a minute. Let me just finish. Because the letters in atzilus are not engraved; they're like written letters on paper, on parchment. These letters already have a metzias davar. They're not made of the same substance. And that's why the letters that are disorganized there, in that parsa, after atzilus, then it's complete concealment. The kelim ain't about droga. Commotion is bar the common, I would say, because we didn't learn this earlier. Commotion is bar the common, as we shall explain. Can you say is bar the common? Yeah, it is bar. You say commotion is bar the common. I don't know. So let me see if what did he say? Let me just remember. Say the ishtalshus the kelim ain't about droga. Right. Okay. I don't recall it earlier.
I couldn't find it. That's why I didn't put it on the bottom.
We'll find it. We'll find it. That they're not bad droga. So what do we have? That the containers, as they evolve, are not in an organized way. That means disorganized letters. So the concealment in the pasuk after atzilus is completely concealed. Let's give some examples here. We have to have some example. I mean, this is a very nice concept. Netzalim is atzilus. Yeah, the spheres of atzilus are the netzalim, the emanations. Atzilus is the general word emanation. That's the chesed or whatever is higher than atzilus. Depends what you. Sometimes depends how far you go.
The OCS are kelim.
Yeah, the pashtus. Well, right now they're both kelim or levushim. It depends which aces. The aces are the avonim. Aces are the kelim. Yeah, for sure. So the kelim of chesed are like aces achkika. Okay. Example I would give. Let me think of an example. You have to have a good example here. Well, in context of riddles, there's for sure examples. You can give somebody a hint to something. You disorganize, but as I said, it's in the same context. The same context. So they don't have to look far. But if you give them an example from a completely different context, then they're really it's very distant from the original source.
And confusing.
Yeah, much more confusing, much more concealing. I'll give an example. I don't know if it works. It works. Let's try this. We talk about time and space, and then envisioning things that are outside of time and space. So when you say, for example, when you want to give an example for something that's not bound by time and space, the first place, the best examples we give are emotions and ideas. Right? Love. A table occupies space. Time, today's Friday, not Thursday. Someone say, what about love? Love is not defined by days, by time, and not defined by space. There's love here and not here. You love somebody, you love them everywhere. You love them all the time. So it's an example for something that's l'mayla mizman ha'makom, relatively speaking. But yeah. But then let's go a step further. What about envisioning? But is love really, or let's say an idea, 2 + 2 = 4? Does that occupy time and space? No, but everywhere. Everywhere in existence, that rule, there's no particular space, 2 + 2 is 4 is here and not there. It's a concept. And also time. It's not limited by any time. But then you have, and you want to say, one second, but is it really not limited? What happens if it's a different type of existence altogether? Where time and space, as we know, it don't exist. You could say it's not gashmizdik time and space, but it has its own parameters. Love is not hate. So, in that sense, love is a different space than hate. Not physical space, but it's a different. It has its own different parameters. So now let's try to understand what kind of L'mayla Mizman Amokim would be outside of that parameter too. And that gets far harder to understand. Because then, right.
That's all sefirot.
Right, exactly. That's what exactly I'm trying to say. I'm doing this opposite. Just trying to show. So here you have, so you can give Mishalim for something L'mayla Mizman Amokim like love in this. So it's a mashal. It's not exactly, because I wouldn't say it's AC is built in Mesudarim. So that's why it's not perfect here. But I'm just trying to explain how you can give a mashal for something and you can get it. It's a little more abstract than what you get, but then you can go to a place where you don't get it at all. The whole thing is completely, I can't understand. What means L'mayla from, that doesn't even have the parameters of chesed and gvura? What does that mean? What does it mean? So what is it? So he says bli gvul. So all you can do is extrapolate. I'm trying to give an example that chesed, remember, is bli gvul. So it has to go through a pasha. In atzilus could understand the bli gvul of chesed, like we understand the love compared to gashmis. But biyah cannot understand the bli gvul of chesed. It can only understand the atzilus because it's through the mashal. I'm just trying to show examples of how the same thing can go through stages, or you can suddenly realize I don't get the whole thing. Follow what I'm saying? I don't know. The reason I qualify that it's an example because I was looking for an example of AC is built in Mesudaris. There is an example, something like that. It's like through process of elimination. We learned before Yediyas Hashlila. Like the reason you would give somebody a chida, a riddle in the first place. Why do you give them a riddle? Besides games and prizes, you give them a riddle because you want to convey to them an idea that's deeper, and it has to come through. If you said it to them straight, they wouldn't get it, or it wouldn't capture the depth of it, or you want them to make an effort to discover it. So I'm trying to find an example. I have to think about that. An example of Aces built in Mesudaris that would be complete concealment, and another one that is not complete concealment. The only example I go back is the one when you give a riddle of something that is of the same idea, same world, same substance, or it's a riddle from a completely foreign paradigm. Okay.
Sometimes when the letters are disorganized, you can actually read the whole sentence. And I've done it many times.
Yeah. They show you how. That the way we read is we read only beginnings and ends.
Right. So that you can read. That's one mashal.
Okay.
Then you can have that every word is different, and that you won't be able to read because.
Okay, that's a good example. I wanted an example of Naveda, to be honest, something that in our appreciation of godliness, because that's really what he wants to say. Because he wants to say that to create atzilus, you need to have is built to Mesudarim, but of the same substance. Because atzilus says, remember I said before, atzilus is the projector, but there's a filter, but the filter is transparent. The filter of biyah is not transparent. Or maybe that's a good example. That's a good example. That's a very good example. Here, let's go back to the projector. The projector is projecting light. Tell me if this works. The first filter is the parsa after chesed, and that's creating letters. But the letters are made of light. They're very, very translucent. You could almost see it. So what you're seeing is it's the same Malchut as before, but now it's letters. So it's built in Mesudar.
It's a darker color, but it's the same.
Built in Mesudar. Let's say it's even if you disorganize the letters that are there. Because it's already, but it's of the same substance. So just of the same substance, but it's concealed to one level. Let's then take another filter, and this filter now is a very dark filter, and almost no light comes through. You just see black letters, and they're a bit disorganized. Now you have two things: you don't have they're disorganized, and also you don't even have the original light anymore. It's a very dark situation. Yeah, there are many examples we can give for this. Good, fine. Yeah, no, I'm talking about the Havana of built in Mesudaris. So that's what we have here. So the difference between this is all still interpreting the first Pirush and Gal. We haven't even got the Gal yet. But only because the energies of atzilus are in a form of midah and shir. That means they're measured and they're limited. They have a measure and limit. And in this, they're be'in arech, they're infinitely distant. The energies of the maitzel, of the emanator shem, is bligvul. They're in a form of bligvul. Like think of it like the white light. Before there's letters. Al zehu aparsa. In other words, even though it's true that the parsa to atzilus from chesed is the same matter, like esis achkike, and not therefore totally concealed, but still you need a parsa, because the fact that the matter of atzilus is, after all, a structure. And gvul, compared to gvul, that's why you have to have that first parsa between the emanator and the emanation. That you shouldn't have the transmission of the energy of the emanator the way it is, without limits. It has to pierce through this filter, through this curtain, through this veil. Like we say, Abba is yenik mamazla. Abba is chokhmah. Is yenik is nurses, or yenik means weans, like gleans. The yenik means like you're only getting a very small flow, like a bottle. Nurses, it's really nursing. But there's a word in English. It's like a very yenik. When the hamshach is complete, you take a cup of water like this. But if you're getting it through a straw, a very it's nourished, but the word here is not the nourish. The limitation, speaking yenik, he wants to say you're only getting a very, very narrow flow. Right. That's the point. A very concentrated, narrow flow. There must be a word. Wean is the opposite when you wean off. Glean maybe. So here we go. Yaina bechinis hasidus. So the example is the sidus of the head. They say when you pull a hair, it hurts. When you cut it, it doesn't. Why? Why does it hurt? Because it has a nerve ending. The follicle of the hair goes into the head. In Ruchnius, it says it's moishle meichen. It's somewhat connected to meichen. But what does it have for meichen? A hair doesn't have any intelligence. So we say it gets moishle meichen. It gets moishle like the leftovers. It's a very, very thin. Think of it from a point of view of energy. It's very little energy in a hair, but it has some energy. So meichen, compared to atzilus, chesed is the crown, is the galgalta, is the skull. Okay? Moiches Tema is there. How does the skull is a separation, is a parsa between the brain and the outside? The hair is coming from that place, from within. Remember, it's from there, it's from the skull of a chesed. But what does it get in Moichin when it comes into conscious intelligence? Here it works the opposite, because the hair is obviously going outward and the brain is inside. But the idea is that it's getting only a very thin ray. Yenik mamazla. So it's getting a very thin amount of energy. That's what he's saying here. That's the parsa. So it needs bikiyas a parsa. What does the hair do? The hair pierces the skull, b'derech bikiyah, through a pierce. So what you have is like a lot of energy, and one little drop comes out, like the example of a hair coming out of the skull. So it's a bikiyah. It's piercing through, but it's a very diminished flow because there's a parsa in between.
It goes through the skull, or it's just the skin on the skull?
Well, nothing. I mean, fine, it could be the skin of the skull, but it's coming from a deeper part. Example is not exactly, but it's bottom line is definitely Kabbalah uses sidus. There's always an example coming from the skull outward, from the galgalta. The skin on the skull in this case is like the lavusha of the galgalta. Fine, it's the idea. So it's a tutz. Yeah, but here we're talking about from the brain. You don't have hair growing here. There's a reason the hair grows on the head, for this reason, because it has energy from the mind, according to Kabbalah. Yeah. Hair generally grows in places where it's protecting something that's usually a vital organ. That's usually what hair. That's why hair grows in the head, because it's, from a scientific point of view, because the head releases a lot of heat, and the hair is like a type of shield. Hold in, and also to protect from bacteria, etc. Hair is like a protector. A beard, some argue, that's why some say beard doesn't have no purpose in physical reason. A beard doesn't do anything for you. But Ruchni is the beard is Yud Gimel Tikkun Dikra. Same thing, the sidus. It's the whole thing in Kabbalah, what the sidus are. The sidus are not just here, they have Kedusha in them. That's why Segalachas Mitzeda, V'Shetel, cutting your hair. Hair has a whole thing. There's that whole weird, that strange medrash that Chassidus brings about that Sarah, he saw Sarah weaving, doing the hair of Avram. What does it all mean? Yeah. Point being, again, you have to understand it in Ruchnis, and then it comes into Gashmi. So, the example of the hair, the yenik, so what he's basically saying here is like this, that even though atzilus is of the same substance, it's elikus, it's divine, but the way it has to go through a pasuk, a veil, And that's like Abba Yenik Mazla. Mazla is Keser. How does Abba get from Keser? It gets like Yenik. It's very thin flow. Like the hair, like the hair that comes in a form of pierce, Bekia. Abba's Chochmah. That's how Chochmah gets its energy from Keser. That's the parsha. Like Yaakov is the letters Yibaka. We say in the morning, the dawn breaks. Dawn break of dawn. Why break? Because the light pierces through the darkness. Aleis HaShachar. Shachar means, by the way, darkness. Shacharus. Zohar says, he asks the question. Aleis HaShachar means the lifting of the darkness. And that's the dawn break.
Opposite of what we think.
Right. People think it's the sun rising. It's not. It's actually the night rising and the sun emerging. The Zohar says on the Parsha in Vayishlach, where he fights with the Malach, Ad Aleis HaShachar. So Zohar says, what's Aleis HaShachar? He says, because the darkness lifted, that's why the Malach couldn't continue fighting with him. Because now the light was coming. Yeah. Shachrus, from the word Shachrus, yeah. So we say Shachris, morning Shachris is actually the opposite. Yeah. Yaakov is the letter Yibaka because he's Bekiya Se'er. He pierces light, Derech HaParsa, through the veil, through the curtain, through the Parsa. So that's what Yaakov does. He takes from Laban Elyon, which is chesed, higher than atzilus, and Osamahem, Shein Laban, and he takes and makes from them akudim nekudim vrudim, meaning that he makes from them, he pierces through the Parsa, and therefore takes from Blikvul and turns it into a shear. But it's of the same substance. It's still a lakus. However, it's disorganized letters of the same substance, like engraved letters.
What's he trying to do? Enhance lower world?
He's trying to first of all transmit these levels down and then elevate them in return. It's really like a bridge. The Ovis built bridges, like Avram built chesed, Yitzchak built Gvura, he built Tiferes. It's a building of bridges between the two worlds. I'll explain that in a moment. Let's just see here. Ubetchila is a long parenthesis.
No, 10
Yeah. Ubetchila himshech Yaakov b'chinas Laban Elyon giluyim eres atzmim shlei b'chinas timsum klal. Now he's breaking it down further. In the beginning, Yaakov transmitted from Laban Elyon, which is the supernal whiteness. Remember the white light before there's details, before there's sefirot. Giluyim. He transmitted from Giluyim Eres Atzmim, revelations of core energies, Shaloi B'chinas Tzimtzum Klal, no Tzimtzum at all. He's qualifying. He just said it came through Tzimtzum. Yaakov is piercing. So he's saying first he transmitted things without a Tzimtzum at all. As it's known, Tzayin comes from the word Yitzia. Tzayin. So Tzayin Lavan is the Yitzia, is the exiting out of, the leaving from the where? From the core, simple, shapeless pleasure. This is one of the highest levels, Tainag HaPoshut. V'himshich misham eres atzmim. And he transmitted from their core energies, essential energies. This is the level of when we transmit air through Torah mitzvahs, that through it is transmitted from Atzmus Ein Sof Baruch Hu, from the highest levels, as we learned earlier. The Inyan Hagal V'Pasha Shanasa, and the Gal and Pasha that he created, that he built between him and Laban, or not that he built, that they built actually, the Pasha that Laban built. That's referring to transmission of a level of air in the cosmic order. So two separate things going on here. In other words, the first thing is Yaakov was mamshich something from a blikvul level through Torah mitzvahs, through his work. Then comes another thing. We talk about the Gal and Pasha. That's already referring to a structured situation with this midashir. But emes himshich Yaakov b'chinas Laban Elyon al the b'chinas Laban Elyon kol ha'eres v'amshachas the b'chinas primis u'b'chinas tzchitzenius. Okay, I got to explain this a little because it's going to be a little complicated. Basically, he's saying, remember, he began the whole thing that after the Shein Laban, after he finished being a shepherd, he left Laban, and he's going back to Yisrael. And then they make this agreement, the Gal is built. Where's that in Shtalshlus? That Gal is between Atzilus between chesed and atzilus. This parenthesis is coming to say, so Yaakov only worked on that level between chesed and atzilus? He said no. He worked from a much higher level and bringing everything down. The gal and parsa is a level when you finally come to atzilus, then he brings from chesed into atzilus. That's the gal. That separates between the two that you should be able to pierce. So that's Yaakov Lashon Yabaka. But be'emes, in truth, that's not the only thing Yaakov did. It wasn't just this last step when they made the gal. In truth, he's saying, everything. From the inner levels, and the lower levels, or outer levels. And everything with an abundance of energy without limitations. Then there's in one stage where you need to have this gal, which we'll see in a second. Maybe that's why it's a metzeva, not a gal. Anyway. Remember, we spoke earlier that when atzilus is revealed, it's Ela told us Malay, because you see the Malchut is on a higher level, so godliness is revealed. So he says, Yeshlema, this is the level that Yaakov was able to do. It's al derech. He revealed al derech how it was before Kedem Chet. Yaakov's revelation was al derech zeh. Because the beginning of creation, also below was the divine revelation. Now, why did he need to do this, Yaakov? This is the answer to your question. He was giving us strength that we should be able to afterwards do this avodah. By giving us this power, by doing this, in order for us to be able to...
But this was already before Yaakov. The world was created that way.
Oh, maybe that's the power. Okay. You're right. My mistake. Why was the world created that way? In order to give power that afterwards. Why did Hashem make the world a perfect world like that in that way? Yeah, exactly. So in the beginning, yes, you're given. I'm sorry. Yes, correct. You're right. Oh, Kamoy Kain, huh? No, the yesh al derech. This is still before. Now then he says Kamoy Kain himshach Yaakov. Okay, so the reason it was the beginning of the creation was like in a sense giving us like a Chanukah Sabayis. When you set out on the journey, you infuse them with power. Same thing, Yaakov, in the beginning, he transmitted Gilead and Sof, the whole thing. And also, in the outer Hamshacha, which is Achakach Nas, Hamshacha. One second. I thought Chetzenis Hamshacha was the Gal. Okay, let me think. I'm not sure the Primis and Chetzenis what he means exactly. But bottom line is that he was mamshech everything. Then came V'achakach when he was leaving. Remember, this is 20 years that he worked. Now, at the end of the process, that he was transmitting all these powers of the divine from the highest levels of Tainagar Poshet, that same Laban, now came V'achakach Naseh, Galapasilis Hamshach B'Seidah V'Adraga. Then came the creating of the Galam Pasha, that there should be Seidah V'Adraga does not mean not Eisius Bilsim and Sedoros, because it is Galam Pasha. He means Seidah V'Adraga not in Bligvul. That in order to have atzilus in a structured way, you need a galam parsa. That's the galam parsa, the mound, the veil between bligvul and gvul. In order to have atzilus, that's what he said here. So this is the first pirush in gal. What is it? Is the gal between chesed or between higher than atzilus and atzilus? That's the first pirush. That's the first pirush. So it's on a higher level. And AC is built in Musudaris, disorganized, but of the same substance. Pirush Beis, who the Lavan, who Lamata, Harbim B'chinas Yaakov. That's where Lavan is in his root. He's higher than Atzilus. Second interpretation is in how it's in Pashtus Aksuvim, how it's down below. How Lavan is below, much farther, Mata Harbim, very, much lower than B'chinas Yaakov, Shu B'chinas Atzilus. So in both interpretations, Yaakov is Atzilus. But now Lavan is not Keser into Atzilus. Lavan is now Biyah. So it's going to go, Galam Pasa is going to be the Pasa after Atzilus. The one of Esis Aksiva. Okay, yeah, right, correct. But definitely, okay. Yeah. Lavan ubchins klippas nega de Bria. Shenikra Lavan lamata. What is Lavan? Is the klippas nega of Bria. So he's already the concealment, the husks of nega de Bria. Shenikra Lavan lamata. That's what it's called, Lavan lamata. Ubchins chochma de klippa. This is the level of Chachma de Klippo. How do we know? Adami Eved Avi. The neged begins Chachma de Kedusha. Yeah. Avi is Chachma. Because Adami Eved Avi, we say it in the Haggadah, That Aram he's talking about. Who's Arami? He's Aram because he comes from.
Laban Arami.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying because he comes from Aram.
No.
That's why.
He was a swindler.
Arami with an ayin?
No, with the olive.
With an aleph.
Yeah. It means he was a swindler.
No, but also from Aram. He was from Aram. He came from Aram. Aram. Yeah.
Okay,
Uvid Avi, meaning he tried to kill, he tried to annihilate our father. So
Here means Avid Avi.
the neged b'chinas, the neged, the neged to the neged,
No, I think it's the nugget.
or the neged. Okay, either way. Bottom line, he tried. So it's interesting types because here you're saying he's trying to destroy, annihilate our father, Yaakov, and here you're saying that because he's trying to annihilate our father, it means he's chochmah because he has the power to annihilate because he's a lumazah, the neged.
Because Avi, our father, means Chachma.
It doesn't matter. I'm saying either way, the types are the same. B'chinas chochmah the kedusha. Yeah, I'm saying, but you would read it, you'd say you're not like our father. That doesn't mean he's a level of Av. Our father's level of Av. But the fact that it's a deeper interpretation. Yeah, zelo mazah. So he's chochmah the klipa. For neid the chochmah the klipa b'chinas yesh, and it's known that chochmah the klipa is yesh. Yesh is a yesh. Yesh is a mitzias. Is a whole entity. She'einu reitzili batlu lichlo. He doesn't want to subjugate and be encompassed in holiness. He doesn't want to be encompassed in the higher holiness and sanctity of Yaakov from atzilus, which is the level of Shema Bittel. Ma is Bittel, is Ban. Laban is Ban. Lamed Ben. Yeah. So now it's a whole different interpretation. So therefore he created a mechitza, created a boundary, a curtain, a division, a barrier. So the mechitza in the shul could be both types. It could be between chesed and atzilus, or it could be the mechitza between love and lamata. Okay.
Is there a practical difference? Maybe in the size or the...
Depends who you're talking to. That's why he created a mechitza, a barrier, to separate beineim, between them. He's a pretty smart man, this lover. He built a gal.
The whole idea of chokhmah the klipa at the same from yesh. Just the technical question.
First of all, everything Himad made here. So yesh is a person, for example, when Hitler conceived of how to kill Jews, he used chokhmah.
But technically speaking, the sefirot drin from ma.
The pnimi is, but God, and chasach levushim and parsois, chokhmah could become chokhmah of klipa. It's not together, but everything goes through tzimtzumim. Chokhmah could also be tzimtzum. We could use our chokhmah to conceive of great ideas. We can use our chokhmah to conceive of sins. You know, creative people that are very destructive. They use their chokhmah. You're asking how? Because everything in kedusha can become klipa when it's concealed. That's the bottom line. Nothing is. It says in das. It says there's no das in klipa. That's what it says. But chokhmah, there is chokhmah in klipa. You're saying why is it called Chachma Koyach Ma? It's not Koyach Ma then. It means, God allowed the power for a person to access the Koyach HaMaskil for Inyonim Hepach HaKdusha. God gave that ability. That's Bechira. You could take Chachma, like taking the Reish HaMelech and sticking it in. So you could use a bittul against itself. There's Ru'umah, the clip of Ru'umah. Look at me, I'm bottle. So everything has. What are all these sounds? Oh.
What? Yeah, there's some missiles in here.
Yeah. They intercepted the back of one was ground.
Let them go in, they'll blow up the mosque.
Well, I'll tell you, from the Rebbe Rashab, when the Clippers started attacking, when Purim, he was fabringing the last Purim, and the Clippers walked into his room, he said, Lomer weiter fabringen, and it'll become bottle. So we're doing something to help.
Let it hit the mosque.
Yeah.
We're doing something to help.
Let
the missile hit the mosque.
Amen.
If you learn properly, the Mechitza will be able to direct it.
They're having the Mekubole, basically. They come zusammen.
So Al-Kain also Mechitza lahavsi b'neim shlo yeh be'erek dusha. He didn't want erek dusha. He wanted to build a boundary. Little by a bitl. He didn't want it to be affecting him bitl. It's like people who consciously say, don't get too close to me because I don't want to be affected by you. The Kedusha.
So he guarded his chokhmah.
So he built a gal. 1 second. Val derech pen be'einav yira. Huh? I know. So what does it say there? What's the lashon there? That Tomer ichel zen mit eigen vet design. So, but what?
I'll see the truth.
Yeah, if I'll see the truth. Yeah.
So he guarded his chokhmah.
Don't confuse me with the facts.
Chokhmah de klippe.
But he guarded his keyachma.
Don't confuse me with the facts.
Not the koyachma. I wouldn't call it the koyachma. He guarded his mitzias, his yeshes. But it's yeshes. It's ultimately yeshes that's using chokhmah. If he let Chachma work, Chachma would affect him. He didn't want the Chachma of Kedusha to affect him. So he's busy. He's like I told you, Aldous Huxley wrote that I'm telling you I don't want God in my life because then I cannot do whatever I want. So bottom line, Grace Denker, Aldous Huxley.
That's really close.
What's the context of Pembe and Avida? What is it? What is it? What that? What?
I think if you go out and you see the moon or star, you should think that it's good.
Okay. Yesh lemed the Zayin Mad Isa Bezeir. Yesh lemed. This is what it says in Zeir. That Kashem Machrizin Lamaila Man Boy Lamachme Apeshchinta. So this is what it says in Zeir. Kashem Machrizin Lamaila. That when and above they comes out a coil, a voice, sound, a call. Man Boy Lamachme Afil Apeshchinta. Who
wants to see?
Who Boy Lamachme? Who?
Who wants to see the face?
No,
wants to see.
Yeah, who wants to see? Man boy lemachme ape shchinta. Who wants to see the face of the Shechina? A sitrach lebeirachas. That's when the sitrach runs. Runs. We're learning exactly this. Who's going to run here? She'ena reitzel liris eze gili alakus. Shifah ben mabitl. So when there's machrizin, there's a machrizin l'mayel, then they call out. Who wants to see the face of the king of the Shechina? The Sitacha runs the other way, doesn't want to see it because it doesn't want to have any elikus that would affect their bittul. So it cause them to have bittul. Well, Achain, Matan Torah Hoyadafka Yadesha Hoyde Yisrei, in parentheses he adds, and that's why Matan Torah was dafka specifically through the acknowledgement of Yisrei, admitting. It says, Vayishma Yisrei, Ata Yadaiti, now I know. Why? Because you needed the hidah, you needed the acceptance of. That's why Matan Torah is in Pasha Yisrei. Because he too, Yisrei was also chachma de klipa, like Laban. Shenikra kohen ein. He was called a kohen of powerful, but also it refers to ein as an yeah. So a kohen is the level of chachma bitl. Through admitting and acknowledging from his batla lagdusha and through subjugating himself and sublimating to the holiness yisrei from the word yisrei and air, an advantageous, a deeper quality of light, of energy. His acknowledgement came through his hearing about the miracles and the signs in the Tzitz Mitzrayim v'Kriyas Yamsuf, the Exodus from Egypt and the parting of the sea. Like it says, Yisrei heard, as kol asher asa Elokim, everything God did. Moshe, and this Moshe drew down, was able to facilitate. Moshe was the one that initiated it. He was able to cause that there should be a revelation of the divine energy also in Chachma of Klippa to cause bittul there. In other words, why didn't it happen by Laban? Because Yaakov didn't have that power. So Moshe had the power to cause his father-in-law. They're both fathers-in-law, by the way. Laban's a father-in-law, Yisrael is a father-in-law. Sach Shvers. And Yishmael and Esav. And he said, L'havdol, the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe. Yeah. It's a Machzadik and the Alter Rebbe. And the beginning of this transmission was through Yankov. So Yankov began the process. And Yesha actually poiled on Yisrael that he should come. Okay.
Yankov started with the Gal. He put the...
I'm finishing, yeah.
And then everybody joined into...
Well, Yankov started with the Matzeva. He's going to say now, we have another paragraph. The point is that we have two interpretations, therefore, in Gal. One is the Gal in Kedusha, where Laban Elyon is higher, and he creates a Gal that there should be the Amshach in atzilus, which needs to be concealed. Yibokam. And the second interpretation is lower than atzilus. That meaning that he built a Gal of Klippa, that it should be block out the holiness.
So where do you see that Yaakov was a Malchut?
In the beginning, he says, Aschol Samshach. He gave the power. That means he gave the kayach. Let's see. Maybe through building the matzeva. According to above, we'll understand what means matzeva. That this stone that I place here, matzeva as a marker, is like the hinyan matzeva akamas hamalchus li is bogili er. Matzeva is the level of setting up, establishing, constructing, or erecting malchus that should have gili er, because malchus on its own is less lamagama klotz. It's in a weaker state. So this is like something matzeva is giving power to malchus. Dini even ubchinis nekuda levad. Because an even on its own, before it's a matzeva, it's just a nekuda. It's a dot, not a point. Remember, avonim, by the way, that's the letters. Okay. Levad. She'ein ba'oiru matzeva. She'ein ba'oiru doesn't have any light, like malchus. Less lamagama doesn't have any energy of its own. Matzeva ubchinis partzuf. When you make a marker, it's already that's the whole point of a matzeva. It's a marker. A stone is a random stone. It could be anywhere. When you turn it into a matzeva, into a, what's the actual translation of a matzeva? A monument. That would be more a gal, maybe. Okay, maybe, yeah. What you're doing now is a partzuf. A partzuf is already a full-blown, partzuf literally means a face, but it means that it's more than just a point. It's already a more developed, multi-dimensional entity, multi-configured entity. Which has gili er, as opposed to the evan, the nekuda. Nekuda is just like a yud, as we will explain. Here it does say kamosh is bar. Okay. And that's what Yaakov innovated, created with the building of this matzeva. What was the point? He took a level which is a low level and made Malchus higher. As remember, when Malchus gets higher, there's Gilei Elikus in the world. As we learned before, when Malchus, by the beginning of creation, remember we said by the beginning of creation, and Yaakov was a recreation of that, Malchus in a higher level, there's Gilei Elikus be'elemis. When Malchus is in its regular state, it conceals. Gamken. Heper b'chinas atzel hagal the Laban. So through his matzeva that he built, he transmits divine godliness into the worlds, which is also in the worlds. Also, in other words, from Malchus also into the worlds. The opposite of the mound or heap or monument of Laban. And we said, what's the gal of Laban? The gal of Laban is to separate Elikus from the world. And he's building a connector. So matzeva is a connector because it makes Malchus more powerful, so it can transmit into the worlds. The gal of Laban is a separator. Even physically, it's a bigger mountain, more stones. Okay, one second. The Ayin Beis Elikim, and what it means is that this matzeva that I placed here will be Beis Elikim. Like he says at the beginning, the pasuk says, "Yeh Beis Elikim." This matzeva will be the house of God.
And he's going back to the other matzeva, not the one that he did before.
I know, but clearly he's connecting the two. He built it before, in order for maybe to give power later. Because this matzeva looks very awfully similar. We have to look it up in the pasuk if there's a connection. If not, it's a beautiful, actually, it makes it very nice, because before he went on the trip, there's no connection. No. So, but then you could explain. Yeah. No, but then you could say like this. But then you could explain like this, that before he went to Choron, to be mevared the tzayin, he already started building the kayach. That later he concluded that the finish of his journey, it makes it very gishmak.
No, but in chesed, love and chesed, maybe up to that point.
That was on the way back after 20 years.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
No, he made the anu matzeva now.
Yeah, that's B'Pashta, that's for sure. But I'm saying it's very gishmak, because he went and he was afraid of going into the biryah, into the klippus. The Eibishter gave him the bracha. So he said, okay, I'll build a matzeva Beis Elikim. And he says there, V'shavti b'shalom, that he's going to come back. So the V'shavti b'shalom is already hinting to, so when he goes back, he finishes what he began. In other words, he started building Malchus. Then when he finished the chain, and was mamshech hakudim nekudim vrudim, he concluded with Malchus, and then, okay. So this is Hepech Hagal. Maybe that's what he meant, that Aschol Samshach was through Yankov already, because Yankov was preempting what Laban was going to do by building this matzeva, basically. Let's go on. Basically, Kimushiyeh b'Malchus Gilib Chinis Primis ve'atzmus Ein Sof. Baruch Hu. So what's Beis Elikim? Why not just matzeva? You just said matzeva is more than Evan. Evan is a nekuda without any gili. any revelation. Matseva is you bring revelation into Malchus. What's Beis Elikim? So he says another level higher. You take Malchus and you lift it up, that it should have in it the Gili, the revelation of the Primius, the inner and core essence of the divine. Mashaloi al pi seder hadraga de seder ishtalshlus. Bligvul, not just the Gvul is aligned properly, not just the Malchus is aligned with atzilus, but also the power from higher than chesed. This is the concept of the moon will be complete. Because moon is Malchus. Malchus, as we learned, after the Kitrug was diminished. When a complete moon is that level, as we shall explain later. This book, by the way, this is going to be the theme of the whole next Maimer or two. This Matseva, all this. And that through this should be the eidens, the revelation of the divine infinite light in the world. Not just Malchus now. Beis Elikim. That's Beis Elikim. So in other words, you take a stone which is just a Nakuda, you turn it into Matseva, which is a Gili and Malchus, which is just a marker, and that Matseva becomes a house of God, a whole building, a structure. And that's Gili, that's Eid Ein Sof, Bligvul. Like we shall explain. In order for there to be this abundance or this additional energy in Malchus, first you need to have elevating Malchus. It should be only a nekuda, only a spark, only a point. And this is the meaning of Even Azes. This stone, this nekuda, will be Beis Elikim. So first you have to have bittul. First Malchus has to ascend through bittul to reach to a higher place. So he's designating this stone is going to become a matzeva, which will be the Beis Elikim. The halal is b'chinas even nekuda, nas is b'chinas Beis Elikim. By elevating that this stone should be a nekuda, a point. In other words, bittul, you make from it Beis Elikim. Because you could do the opposite. You could take the stone and turn it into a gal, into a block. The same stone could become the same stone that you use to build the base of Mikdash can be a stone that you use to throw at someone, or to build a barrier that doesn't let holiness in. And this is the meaning Yiyah Beis Elikim. It should have said Tiyah Beis Elikim. What's Yiyah in the masculine? That's referring that Malchus should be illuminate the gili of the immanent energy and the core energy, and it should be mashpia, it should transmit and carry it into biyah. Al kein nemer yihi loshen zocher, because Malchus is becoming a mashpia. That's what it means. Being that Malchus is first elevating through bittul, then what does it do? Its role is to transmit divine into the world and biyah. That's why it says Yiyah Beis Elikim, because it's loshen zocher, being that it's now acting like a mashpia, not as a makabel. A transmitter, not a recipient. Or Commission is barley al dashuv Yisrael, like we learned earlier in the Maimed Dashuv Yisrael. That's a while back. Being Adenu Zenu, we learned by Adenu Zenu the kad salkin milun le'ela miknas Yisrael kula d'chad inun. We learned by Adenu Zenu that Malchus on its own is the keva, but then Adenu Zenu, you give into the kad salkin milun le'ela, that when you
the words go up.
The words go elevate up. They all become the level of Zachar, of Mashpia. You learned earlier that's when Malchus. Remember the whole thing that he's spoken about sefirot Sagnuzis. He was talking about how Malchus elevates to the level of Zachar. Same Malchus when it receives from Bina, Nikra Adain. It becomes Adain. It becomes a master, Zachar. Masculine transmission power, not just recipients. Remember he said there was Biti, Achesi, Imi, 3 levels. The daughter, the sister, and the mother. So Bas becomes like the mother. That's what we learned there back then. Okay. What? Remember he was talking the whole thing with Baruch Shamar. And then we went later to Ezra, Adenu Zenu, Shulmis Gavenu, all the levels there. So Adenu Zenu rises to the level of Bina. And then it becomes like a The same thing when it radiates the Eir Atzmi from Beis Elikim, from higher levels, the core energies in the Malchus, it becomes Yeh like a Zachar, it's Mashpia. So Beis HaMikdash is not, even though it could be the feminine, but the Beis HaMikdash is a transmitter, not a recipient. V'gam yesh leim Yeh, another explanation in Yeh, who Shavavke Yeh b'madreges Yudke. Another is years. Remember we said before, so he said the bottom of page 204 in chapter 6, 106. He said from that Izal that Vavke will be like Yeh, Malchus and Zah will be like Chachma and Bina. So Vavke Yeh b'madreges Yudke, or canal, like we discussed earlier, b'shem al-Kutatera Marizal, from the name of the Kutatera Marizal, b'shakedem ached, before the sin of the tree of knowledge, hayibayfin kazeh, that's how it was. V'chein yeh losid, and that's how it will be losid. That's why, v'zeh shekos, yeh beis alikim. It will be yeh. So Malchus, which is mispar in Sfiris, elevates to Sipur all the way to Sapir. That's the point here. Elevates to Sapir, and that's transmitting downward. That's Yiyah. This is Malchus, the level of Malchus that was a Nakuda, just a point. Huh? Yeah. Okay, Even Hazayis is feminine, right? Asher Samti Matzeva, that I placed here as a marker. B'chinas Partzuf, in the state of Partzuf. Yiyah, b'chinas Beis Alikim, b'chinas Teitzu Primi V'atzmi. It will be a Beis Alikim. The future. Beis HaMikdash with additional imminent energy and core energy. V'zeh yiyah shamalchus. V'zehu yiyah. That's the meaning of yiyah. Shamalchus tiyah b'chinas tchara mashpiyah. Yiyah. That it will be, that Malchus will become a masculine and a giver and a transmitter. U'madreges hamalchus yiyah kamei avah. The level of Malchus will be like Abba v'Ima, Chachma bina. V'yiyah hagili ayidei Malchus lamata b'yah. And there will be the revelation of Malchus down in the worlds of b'yah. That's for sure. They already have.
Yes.
Kitzur. What he didn't answer, but I think he hinted to, why he asked a question, remember? Not a question. That by Laban it says, Kavanosi yasagam kematzeva of him osugal. Okay, because matzeva, in other words, the Bechai said he wanted them to make a matzeva, and they ended up making a gal. So that's the negative interpretation, because a matzeva is the elevation of Malchus through Bittul to bring it down, and instead Lavan of Klippa decided to make a gal, which is a separation. But according to the first interpretation in gal, it doesn't really work. It does work. No, we can't really know, because it doesn't explain it. Because then what the gal of Malyusi built a gal that's not.
Might explain it in the kids.
Maybe okay. V'zeh shekos about that gal. Ve'eda hamatzeva. This is the meaning what it says. Adagal. Edagal. I'm sorry. Edagal ve'eda hamatzeva. That the gal and the matzeva will be a witness, a testimony. Yivayir beis pirushim be'inyan hagal she'osu Lavan. Explain two interpretations in this mound that Lavan built. The first is that it's the veil between the emanator and the emanations, higher than atzilus. That's engraved letters. Organized, disorganized but engraved, same mohus. So what's the concealment of atzilus? Remember I said it's light, it's elikus. But now there's revealed elikus, how it is in the structure of midah and gvul. It's the revelation of the 10 hidden spheres, as we discussed earlier. But it's of the same mohus, it's godliness. It's the godliness in midah and gvul. Whereas after atzilus, it's no longer of the same mahus. It's already an separate entity. So in the beginning, Yankov transmitted a core energy, and that's the energy of Torah mitzvahs. Also the outer dimension of it in a revealed way. That's one interpretation. Habei, the second interpretation, this is the veil, the boundary between Atzilus and Klippas Nega. But also Lavan created in a way that it should not radiate in its energy, it should not be a state of bittul. Moshe transmitted and brought down bittul also Nega and Yisrei. And the schol, the beginning of it was through Yaakov. And with this we understand the meaning that this stone, this Malchus, this Nakuda becomes Malchus, which in turn becomes Beis Elokim, transmits it all below. I would even say that maybe Even Hazais may be Kuda Kav Shetach. Maybe it's also the three levels of Misper, Sipur, and Sapir. Okay, we'll stop here. We finished Discourse 27. We did chapter 107, which is the bottom of page 205 through 207.